Whoever said not to judge a book by its cover is wrong, because it's really the only reason why I bought this. To be fair, the book gave me ample reason as to why this was a good purchase after the fact, but the cover is really why I spent my money. I have a camera now. Hello everyone, today I'm going to be talking about Steal the Sky by Megan E. O'Keefe, Book 1 of The Scorched Continent. To be honest, I really wanted to not like this book when I first started reading it, because it was kind of an impulse buy. I was meeting up with a friend in my local bookstore, and you can't just not buy books when you go to a bookstore, and the spine of O'Keefe's novel caught my eye. Anybody who knows me is aware that I'm a huge sucker for aesthetic. The spine of this book is this gritty orange color that fades to a dusty orangish brown near the bottom in an attempt to mimic a rising or setting sun. The title sits with these big stylized block letters. It's simplistic yet effective, and I like the way it looks on my shelf. Simplistic is actually the first complaint I thought I had when I started reading. O'Keefe throws a lot at you in the first couple of chapters and worries about filling in the details later. I'm personally more accustomed to reading these massive 1,000-page tomes, so the brusqueness of a brief 300-page jaunt came as a bit of a shock. What do you mean we're not taking 10 pages to describe the buildings? My analytical brain kept trying to take over while I was reading, to break down the story into its component parts and then try to, unfairly, hold it up to the likes of The Wheel of Time or A Song of Ice and Fire. Unsurprisingly, this led to a displeasurable reading experience. I found myself only able to read a couple of chapters at a time before having to put the book down and do something else. The characters grated, the comedy didn't land, it felt too fast-paced, while also somehow feeling meandering. Part of me didn't want to finish reading. Why is it then that I said I'm glad I bought Steal the Sky at the top of the video? Because I was reading it wrong. First though, if you're new here and are interested in what I do, or if you're returning and haven't already, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. It's absolutely free, and it really does help me out. Anyway, what was I talking about? I ask you, viewer, what does a play written in the 1850s have in common with Dragon Ball Z? Melodrama. There are good guys and bad guys who do good and bad things respectively, so that everybody knows who is good and who is bad. Sometimes bad guys will become good guys, and sometimes vice versa, but when you're bad, you're always over the top, and when you're good, you're always righteous. Elements of the melodrama are heavily apparent in Steal the Sky. Detan Honding, the most main character, is a rogue and a rapscallion, but he has a heart of gold. Despite being a thief and a con man, he always goes out of his way to help people. Rip Kaleshi, the third most main character, is a good cop working in a brutal system, who refuses to get dragged down into the muck. She must stand beyond reproach in order to combat the lawful evil force that is Thratia, otherwise known as Ex-Commodore Throatslitter. The good Ex-Commodore is a bad guy, and she knows it. Thratia walks around in her old military garb and has a bunch of thugs roaming the streets, keeping the peace and collecting intel. She's constantly making both veiled and overt threats and always has a few knives hidden on her person. Hell, she even dabbles in the slave trade. If none of that was bad enough, the woman actively attempts to assassinate her political rivals in her near-constant acquisition of power. #girlboss. It all feels very cut and dry, at least in the first half, and I desperately wanted it not to. While oftentimes fast-paced on a moment-to-moment basis, O'Keefe lets her story simmer a little bit before throwing the meat in. It's kind of like One Piece in the way of its presentation, outwardly vapid and goofy while still holding a rich inner core filled with vast lore and resonant character histories. Like Oda, O'Keefe will get to what she has to say eventually, but in the meantime it's probably best to just sit back and laugh at the jokes. I didn't realize this until two very important things happen. The first of which was that I decided to take Steal the Sky to work with me. I stashed it in my locker with the intent of reading it on my lunch break, as opposed to piddling around on my phone for an hour. Suddenly, the story didn't feel like a slog anymore. It I wasn't wandering through a meandering story, but getting little flashes of a breakneck, adventurous mystery to contrast the drab reality of life under late-stage capitalism. I would feel a sense of urgency overtake me while I was reading, trying to get to an acceptable stopping point before returning to work. As a result, I would get cut off at the height of exciting moments as opposed to putting the book down during dull ones. To put it simply, O'Keeffe's novel transformed in my hands into this escapist romp reminiscent of the action cartoons I would watch on public broadcast as a kid. And then she hit me with the hard stuff. The other thing that made me change my mind on this book was the second most main character, Pelkaya. In this world, two things control the economy: Cell and Cell sensitives. Cell is the gas that powers the airships that connect the Valathian Empire to the scorched continent on which our story takes place. Cell sensitives are the ones who can shape said gas with their minds. Detan Honding is a cell sensitive, though not a very powerful one, and his sensitivity is one of the reasons that he's constantly on the run. Pelkaya, however, is a little different. Most nowadays would call her a doppel, capable of shaping Cell onto her face in order to impersonate people around her. Pelkaya would take offense to such a term. She prefers the title of illusionist. When we're first introduced to her, Pelkaya is a rumor, a shadowy, cloaked figure done murder in the night. Doppels are set up to be feared and hated by society at large, and are treated as inhumane, shape-shifting creatures incapable of being understood or empathized with. They exist as this world's version of a boogeyman, skulking on the fringes of society, just waiting to slither into your room and body snatch you while you sleep. Of course, this is a falsehood, a prejudice born from the all-too-human predisposition towards fear for the unknown and the other. Pelkaya isn't some faceless monster, but a grieving mother who has let anger and the loss of her son fester over many years until she couldn't take it anymore. The reason she commits murder is raw and emotional, and most importantly, human. Pelkaya's character is what opens us up to the depth this story can provide. Here, we have a character who does bad things for good reasons, and good things in the name of self-preservation and self-interest. She doesn't fit into the cookie-cutter outline of good guy or bad guy, and as a direct result of her actions, we start to see the world gray out around her. No longer are we reading the story of black and white, of good people and bad people, but just people. People coping with shitty circumstances who are ruled over by an even shittier tyrannical government. It becomes a story about the powerless who get caught up in the wider machinations of the power-hungry and the cruel. A story about trying to make something go right in a world full of misery. I don't want people to think I think this is a masterpiece, because I don't. It's fun and well worth the time to read, but I also can't deny that there's probably better fiction out there. To put it short, I'm not scrambling to pick up the sequel, but I wouldn't mind reading it eventually. Which I guess brings me to the rating. I've given a lot of thought to this, and I finally come up with a rating system for my videos going forward. I kept running into the problem of quality, because I've read or watched some things that are absolute trash, and still had a wonderful time. As such, I've decided not to rate things on how good they are, but rather how much I think they are worth your time. I would hate to recommend someone interact with a piece of media that would be a waste of their time, so I've crafted a system that takes this into account. It's a scale from 0 to 10, representing a bell curve that places 5 in the exact middle. Anything above a 3 in this system, i.e. 4 or more, is worth your time to read and gets exponentially more worth your time the higher the number gets. Most of all the things I review will either be a 4, a 5, or a 6. Everybody understand? Good. Steal the Sky is a 5. Thank you everyone for watching this far. I really hope you enjoyed it. Have any of you read this book yet? If not, does this make you want to? Am I an idiot moron who should shut up about literature? please let me know in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, do the YouTube stuff. I have a podcast now. That'll be down in the description. Anyways, as always, it is Tuesday. I am Tuesday, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.